that would be BR 180, presented by Representative Danny Bentley. And I'm going to ask, as Representative Bentley is presenting that, also the next presentation is with Diane McFarling with River Valley Regional Prevention Center. I'm going to ask Diane to also join you at the table as you're making your presentation. And then we can move into that last segment. Dr. Bentley, we know who you are, but just for formality, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Danny R. Bentley. I'm State Representative from District 98. And I want to thank the Madam Chair ladies and the Interim Joint Committee here for listening to my resolution, which I filed last year. It is a concurrent resolution for expediting of research and safety and efficacy of the use of marijuana for medical purposes. But first I want to establish my credibility. I teach for Ohio University in pre-nursing. I've been there for 27 years. I have a doctor of pharmacy from the University of Kentucky, and I practiced 44 years in community pharmacy. My job is to know the history and current practice of the therapeutic uses of medication, preparations, and compounds, and the chemistry of those compounds and the physiological effects and pharmacokinetics of them. I must also know and evaluate the most current research findings. Furthermore, I must know it well enough to teach it to other healthcare providers who will be caring for those who suffer from the very same chronic illnesses and conditions that many in this room seek relief from. All of us here want to see effective and safe remedies from life-altering conditions such as PTSD, chronic pain, nausea and vomiting, and E.M.S, multiple sclerosis. The field of pharmacology is a response to that very desire, the desire to alleviate pain and suffering and heal the sick. And those in my field, as well as the patients with chronic, painful, and life-threatening conditions, have always sought remedies when what was available was insufficient, since the beginning of time, since the beginning of our country. So much that people often in desperation are willing to hope and to try preparations that in the end are more harmful than good. Think of the snake oil remedies and the salesmen of the 1800s. So much that people have been bled, purged, and even slowly poisoned, all under care. It was a somewhat informal or uninformed attempt to improve their condition, only to make it worse, sometimes fatality. Look at President George Washington, how he died. It was from that history of error and cures that evidence-based science has been recognized as the only safe, effective, and responsible way forward. Think how far raw opium has came. Cocoa leaves or mustard gas by research and evidence-based being brought forward. When we have not had the most careful study, we have ended up with unintended consequences in our history. In 1937, the sulfanilamide. 1962, the thalidomide babies. And so the National Institute of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, in concert with research experts in pharmacology, have pioneered thousands of safe, effective remedies to alleviate and eliminate disease, pain, and suffering. These agencies and the efforts are recognized as a hallmark of excellence. They're a hallmark of excellence around the globe. Why would we in this committee room not heed their advice? There is no question there has been barriers to establishing, let alone utilizing any medical benefits of cannabinoids. These barriers established by the federal government need to be adjusted to allow the responsible and swift advancement of research and conclusion, as we are working closer now with Canada and Israel. Many of us have heard testimony from the other position to legalize medical marijuana now, and it seems somewhat convincing. But then you hear the research to the contrary. Why should we believe? What is the right thing to do? How can we as legislators make a responsible decision? Think about it. Opioids and nicotine were marketed as harmless and went on by scientific evidence to show that they killed people. In the Wall Street Journal on November the 1st, 2018, the CEO of Coca-Cola said they would be not putting any cannabis in their drinks. How come? Because he quoted this, we cannot make it safe. Our customers trust us to do the right thing. We cannot make it safe. So the answer to the legislators, the answer is we can't. We can't determine the right thing to do without clearing away all the noise, all the clamor, and the conflicting account, and rely on the advice of those experts who are there for that purpose and have already said we need more research on the harmful effects. Benefits are modest at best, harms are unknown. We must rely on the system in place, and that is the reason for this concurrent resolution. In the meantime, let us urge that system, the FDA, the NIH, to move forward. New evidence is already pouring in from places where marijuana is being used, with some benefits, but also many harmful effects. As I said before, new research with Canada released this month, Israel. Let us join together as a legislative body and urge the federal government. Section 3, page 4 of the law that was given to you on that resolution, if you would read it. But in conclusion, who is not deeply moved by the stories of those desperate for relief? Those people suffering. Who does not want to do all within their power to help those silent sufferers? It is truly our task to help, not harm them, and the many thousands of others who would be harmed by us if, in the name of compassion, we make a hasty, uninformed, unscientific decision that is not our decision to make. So I urge you to consider this resolution and to vote yes on it. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Lady.
Thank you, Representative Bentley. Do we have any questions from the members? Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Bentley, thank you for this resolution. I know you filed this, I believe, last year as well through the House, and I read it, and it's well written, so I commend you on the detail of it. I think it's important when we have these discussions about what people call medical marijuana that we understand what we're talking about, because we use that term as though everybody knows what that means. And I find it frustrating because what I might consider medical marijuana, you might consider something different, and other advocates who are here are something different. We hear from a lot of groups who come here to the Capitol who advocate for this topic and this issue. And I've got families who come in who say, listen, I've got a child with seizures or with Crohn's disease, and I think compounds in this might help. I don't want them to smoke it. I don't want them to eat the raw plant. I just want to get a pill that I know the dose and I know how much they're getting, and they can get CBD oil or they can get something along those lines. And I sympathize for those folks. And those are the ones that I think, okay, they've got a legitimate concern. They think it might help. What we need is research. And I've reached out to our federal representatives on this topic many times, saying, what can we do to please expedite this? Let the University of Kentucky and the University of Louisville open up their doors and do research with these compounds that are being extracted from hemp or from marijuana potentially, because those compounds can be done from both. I think it's important that if you consider medical marijuana access to CBD or THC, we have that available right now. I can write a prescription, not that I'm going to offer that, but I could write a prescription right now for Marinol or Epidiolex or any of these products. Yeah. We use it for people for various reasons, for weight loss or appetite stimulation or things along those lines. And we can prescribe those now. And so if the desire is for the compounds that are in these plants, just like people might say we want a desire for treatment of what's in a cocaine derivative, which is tetracaine or novocaine or any of these. We don't let people grow their own coca leaves and use it at their own discretion. We extract the compounds and use it medically with known dosages and known administration frequencies. We don't let people grow poppy or opium in their backyard and use it on their own random purposes of smoking it or ingesting it raw. We extract the compounds from that, and we can administer that in the methods of morphine or other kinds of opiates that we can have out there for specific purposes. Lots of ketamine, a drug that we find in LSD. You don't let people produce their own because it can cause some bad outcomes. Marijuana does have negative effects on people as well. And there's plenty of studies coming out now showing that chronic users are going to have higher risks of heart disease and emphysema and other things that we've had out there. And I was looking up some of the ads on my phone of tobacco, of doctors and dentists saying, good stuff for your throat, it'll get rid of your cough, go ahead and smoke all the tobacco you can, back in the 1940s and 50s. And we now look at that and we scoff at it. But that was the understanding because we had a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding. And so I commend you for this call because we need research, and I think the medical community is open to it. But when we use the term medical marijuana, everybody assumes that if you don't support that and you're a doctor, you must be some kind of an animal because you don't want people to have relief. But we need to have the research and the studies to know how much, when to give it, frequently, for what purposes, and for what causes. And so with that, I think medical marijuana for some people is I want to grow my own stash in the backyard and use it on my own. I don't want to have to pay a pharmaceutical company or have someone do that. I want to be able to roll them, eat them, smoke them, whatever it is. And with that comes a lot of variability, a lot of concentration of THC and CBD, and we don't know the exact dosages of how to give that. So I commend you on that. I commend you on the way you've written this to call for research, because that's what we are, after all, as scientists, most of us at least who are in this field, and we want to have the proof. And if the proof is there, then we use it. And again, we have random docs out there who will say, it works for my patient, so it's going to work for everybody. Not necessarily. And there's been a lot of mistakes made in the past, and I think we have to tread very carefully on this. And as a smoke-free guy who promotes that policy, I can't imagine anybody smoking anything that's going to be good for their lungs. It's going to be bad for them, and no matter in what aspect that we have it in. That's a very long-winded preface and statement on this, but the question I have for you, Representative, is when you use the term medical marijuana, how would you define that? I mean, that's not defined in the resolution. How would you define that? Do you envision that as being compounds? Do you envision that as being raw material, et cetera?
Some people consider it to be the whole plant. If you talk about the whole plant, there's over 1,000 compounds and over 70 compounds of THC. For the FDA to approve a drug, it has to separate and isolate that compound so that it can dose it for the whole population. So it'll be up to them to determine which one will be effective through phase 2 and phase 3 studies. The term medical marijuana is today really means the whole plant. So like you say, it needs to be well defined. And that's part of this, asking the FDA to do that.
I think it's also important with what's hopefully going to be coming down from the federal side of things, is that we're hopefully going to get a farm bill that's going to legalize hemp. And that a lot of those same compounds can be found in hemp, and the same extraction methods can be used to extract those compounds and do that research, that if it loosens that door, that hopefully it'll loosen the research on at least the compounds that are in those plants and how that can be used. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Chairwoman Adams.
I was just going to, excuse me, I just received a text from Representative St. Onge, who asked that I make a quick statement that her and Representative E.M.S will support this resolution, but they are also going to be filing a bill that will, I guess, cover the topic of medical marijuana. And she just wanted me to point that out today. So that's all I have, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Representative Mosier?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to commend you for filing this resolution again. I will proudly co-sponsor this. I really would just like to echo what Senator Alvarado has very articulately laid out in terms of what we need to really be thinking about when we talk about medical marijuana. And I think that you know very well where I stand. I think that we have a process that we use for any other medication. And the process for deriving medicinal benefits from THC is actually working. And I think that we need to be patient. And I understand that there are patients who are feeling, for whatever reason, very desperate for some relief, and that this seems to be some sort of quick answer. We don't do that with any other medications. We don't do that with any other plants. And so I think that asking for more research is the prudent way to go with this. And I fully support your efforts and look forward to working with you on this. And I'm very happy to hear that Representative St. Onge and Representative E.M.S are in favor of this as well. I think that this is all of our goal, is to provide safe alternative medications but we do need to know what the indications and the dosing is before we can really recommend it. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Senator Danny Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Bentley, I too will join in supporting this resolution. And my question on this, and I look at it from a perspective that most of you all know I have a daughter with cerebral palsy. And the doctor that she sees is in Dallas, Texas. She is a researcher in the area. She has cerebral palsy herself, and she's been very open to natural remedies and things that might help our daughter as she has grown older. So we were surprised when we, during the last trip, we asked about CBD oil. We assumed that she would say, absolutely, try it. Her response was absolutely not. Just because of the reasons that you and Dr. Alvarado have mentioned, there simply has not been enough research to know what the effects will be. So as disappointed as we were with that, we're going to wait. And my question for you is, what do you perceive is the greatest holdup right now at the federal level with all the attention that this subject is getting across the country? What is the holdup, and why is it not being something being addressed at the federal level that will allow the additional research that is badly needed?
Okay. The reason it's been held up is because it's Schedule 1. Most marijuana is grown down at Mississippi at the university. But now, the way I understand, they're going to start getting some from Canada for doing more research. So it would be up to Washington to change it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. It's Schedule 1 on the international treaty also. And until that's done, that probably will discourage the research because it's so complicated to handle Schedule 1. If you had marijuana cigarettes and say you were a researcher, you would have special security, special clearance, and a lot of stuff to do that research. And when you're talking about CBD oil, I think the more research is coming out on it because there is drug interactions. It is metabolized through the liver and the cytochrome P450 system. So it does have some drug interactions with Coumadin, which is a blood thinner, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, some statins, and some things used for transplants like Sanimune, that drug. So as research is coming out, we probably need more research, but to do the full research, the government had to change it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. Thank you for your question.
It would be interesting to get maybe a presentation from the DEA at some point to really understand what the holdup is on doing this. I think we all know it's inevitable that it's going to happen, and I just don't understand why at the federal level they're dragging their feet. So the chairs, that might be a good presentation maybe to hear from the DEA at some point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, there is a docket by the DEA where they were asked to change it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, and I can supply that to people after the meeting.
Thank you. And again, it's the change in scheduling. I want to thank you for the presentation. You know, we see the idea of medical cannabis go through a lot of committees, but I will charge this committee as I leave that we've heard or listened to testimony on products or this process in the past, and you could legalize it through and respectfully through judiciary or state government. But we're talking about a substance or a product that is going to be regulated or could be regulated in the Commonwealth as medical, and I think the proper review begins, as the FDA, as things move along, would be the charge of this committee. It comes under that scope. So I encourage you in your work in the future, perhaps having the FDA come in. In the last year, we've had two companies here whose drugs or medications received orphan drug status. And I pointed that out because the urgency to bring those products to market while they had not completed all of their studies was because they had such a value and an impact on disease or rare disease or critical to life that the FDA made that status of orphan drug. And something's missing because these products, medical cannabis, medical marijuana, whatever we want to call them, are, if the efficacy is there and the urgent need, the request can be made. In 2017, the FDA redid their whole to speed up that process of orphan drug status. So I just point that out to again, looking at how a drug receives approval, how it moves into the market. But there is also a process where those medications that are going to impact lives and are urgently needed can sort of speed up or be granted that sort of orphan drug status. So just as a reminder, because we did hear of two medications just in recent years that were just in the last couple of years that were granted that status among many. So I wanted to thank you. Any other questions at this point? No more from the members. But I think this is the perfect segue into our next presenter. I had the opportunity, thanks to a meeting in Northern Kentucky, of hearing Ms. McFarling present. And I think it's important, sometimes we go outside the state and we realize that right here within the Commonwealth, we have projects that are committed to the issue of medical cannabis, marijuana. And one of the things, back in the early 90s, I started under workplace wellness drug testing. All the employers wanted drug testing in the workplace because they wanted to reduce their lost time, reduce work time, accidents and those impairments and the cost to their workers' comp. And so now employers again are challenged with, as these products, whether they're here in Kentucky or in other states, become legal, and we have to look at how does that impact individuals using that? How does it impact the workforce and employers? And what are the ramifications on lost time, preventable accidents? And I think across the cadre. So if you want to introduce yourself and begin, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairs and distinguished members of the committee. I'm Diane McFarling. I'm a prevention specialist, certified prevention specialist. Have been in the field of prevention for about 18 years. And in the last 7 years, I've worked as the representative for the Kentucky Marijuana Prevention Enhancement Site. So the prevention enhancement sites are a part of the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities, the Prevention and Promotion Branch. Now that's a mouthful. So we've referred to them as the DBHDID. But there are prevention enhancement sites that we serve the entire state. They are tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, substance-exposed infants, faith-based, and our latest one is a prevention enhancement site on suicide. So our charge is to look at the best practices, evidence-based practices for each of these topics, and then to serve the 120 counties of the Commonwealth in coming up with the best strategies that we have to do that. So I travel a lot of places in the state of Kentucky that I did not know existed, and have had the pleasure to meet a lot of pretty fantastic people in our state. And I agree with the presenter before that was talking about what a great state we live in. So it has been an exciting time to be doing this. So we have, each of us are connected to a community mental health center, and I am with River Valley Behavioral Health, but we serve the entire state. So we look at marijuana in Kentucky, and we look at that Kentucky is a leading marijuana producer, even though we have no legalized product. We've been among the top 5 domestic producers for at least 5 years, and probably a lot more than that. And when we look at the state police do eradications every year, in 2015 there was nearly $800 million worth of marijuana that was eradicated. So that is a lot of eradication and the arrests that go with that. So I was in Oregon, and I was pretty impressed by some of the plants that were in Oregon, because these look more like trees to me than they do plants. So I was thinking a plant is what you set on your desk, or maybe that you have sitting on your patio. But this was like an orchard. That I come to Kentucky, and I understand that we have really great marijuana here too. So this is all from Kentucky. And right beside the outdoor building with the playground in the background. Then this is also from the state police, the top 10 producing counties for marijuana. And you'll see that it is primarily in the eastern part of the state. So me living in Owensboro in the western part was feeling pretty safe and pretty good. Then when the state police placed their map that showed where the eradication efforts were, I see that it's really widespread across the whole state. But again, I'm Davis County, so I was feeling pretty good. But pretty much what they said was it's in Davis County too, but there were some things that they didn't get the data placed. So they said it's really in each of our counties, and some more than others, but it is a product that's grown in our state. As we look at the eradication throughout the years, going back from 2010 to 2015, we see that this number is going up every year, the amount that's eradicated. So if we take that and we divide that up to where it's more usable terms and things that we can wrap our minds around and how much eradication really produces, we'll see that we produce enough cannabis to provide 239 joints for every man, woman, and child in the state of Kentucky every year. So that's a lot of marijuana that is grown in a state where we have no legalization. But it is a high-risk, low-profit business. There's a lot of risk that's associated with growing these. So sometimes traffickers will find it safer to go to medical marijuana or recreational marijuana from other states, California, Colorado, Oregon, and bring it back to Kentucky and sell it. Traffickers have found that they can buy a pound of medical marijuana in California for $1,500 and come back and sell it for $6,000. So that's a lot of return on their profit without having to go through the grow process. So when Colorado passed their legalization, it was that it had to stay within the state bounds, that it could not go outside the state of Colorado. But we have found that Colorado marijuana appeared in at least 37 states, not just completely bound to the state of Colorado. So we see it reaching far beyond what the intent was of that. But still, I would be remiss if I didn't say the drug that most Americans are using is alcohol. That's still the number one drug of choice. But we do see that tobacco and marijuana are on the radar and on the screen and for us to pay attention to. In the Monitoring the Future study shows that marijuana in about 2009 took over tobacco. Not in the state of Kentucky. Tobacco is still what our youth are using more than what they are using the marijuana. But as a nation, we have seen some changes and the changes in usage of what the products are. And that is due a lot to the policies of those states. So we see, again, pretty much drug use remains static. It's not changed. It goes up and it goes down. It varies somewhat. But when we look at this slide, it tells us, it shows that there's a lot of that tan area there, and that's people who are not using substances at all. So there's still a lot of people who are not using substances. But that darker area are the illegal substances that are used. And of that darker area, marijuana is the number one drug that is used primarily, and you'll see the bar graph there that shows it is significantly more than what the other drugs are. This is past month use by county. This is from SAMHSA, and you will notice that the counties that are the darkest and have the more use are the states that have legalized marijuana products. Monitoring the Future also looks at risk versus use and how our youth view, whether they view marijuana as a risky proposition, something that they can do. And we found that as they view it as less risk, they will use more. So it's like a mirror image that we see of the products. And so we see 8th, 10th, and 12th graders there, and their use for the last 12 months. And again, as the perception of risk goes down, the use goes up. And as perception of risk goes up, use goes down. So I maintain that we tell our kids not just to say no, but to really look at what the risks are, and we probably have more success with that. These are Kentucky data from the Kentucky Prevention Survey, Kentucky Incentives for Prevention, done by the Reach of Louisville. And this is a statewide survey that has just been completed this year, and we will soon have the 2018 data to go with this. And what we see that in all of the grades, marijuana is slightly decreasing. But when we look at the perception of risk is decreasing. And as we see the 6th graders to 8th graders to 10th graders to 12th graders, we see that the 12th graders do not perceive there to be as much risk as what 6th graders do. So here's what we see from research about marijuana. Regular use compromises our ability to learn and to remember. It impairs our ability to focus, sustain, and shift attention. It's hard for us to change from one thought to the next thought. It's hard for us, if we're driving a car, we may focus on staying between the lines, but we may not see the child that runs in front of us and be able to shift our attention to put the brake on. Long-term use also reduces our ability to organize and integrate complex information. And there was a 2012 study done by Madeline Meyer, and she looked at the change in IQ scores, and this was a comprehensive long-term study that looked at people at various points for over 30 years to see where they were. And she saw as much as an 8-point decline in IQ scores based upon this longitudinal study. So where we see the impacts of marijuana are in the brain. And when we look at this slide, we see the pink dots. Those are receptor sites. We have a natural endocannabinoid system, and those are the receptor sites for the endocannabinoids that we produce on our own. And when those sites are filled, it affects things like the visual center, the reward system, our temperature gauge, the things that we, how we sense pain. All of those things are controlled by these sites being filled. And the natural chemical that we have is called anandamide. And this slide shows that between THC and anandamide, there is a very similar chemical structure. So it makes THC fit perfectly in those receptor sites in our brain that are impacted. And when the THC fills those receptor sites, then our own chemical can no longer fill those. And it changes how we respond to those stimuli. The differences between THC and anandamide: THC is much stronger and lasts longer than our own chemical. And it interferes with the ability that we have to protect and balance our cell activity, because our central nervous system strives to keep us in balance. So it interferes with that balance that we have. So it's more like having a sledgehammer as compared to a scalpel. When we look at, one of the primary things to focus on in looking at marijuana is the rate of potency. And so in the early days, the 60s and the 70s, potency was very low, 1%, 2%, 3% was really a high potency rate for marijuana. But as we see that our rates have continued to climb for the potency that's there, which means it gives a stronger high. The edibles that many use are at 70 and 80% potency as compared to even the smoked product. And then when we look at the wax or the oil, they are at 90 to 95% potency for THC, which is a concern. So we see a lot of violence and a lot of erratic behavior that comes when the strains are this high and are being used. And as we see here, potency continues to rise, and so it's not really decreasing, it just continues to rise. Here are some of the types of marijuana that's done. High Times magazine has a cannabis cup every year, and so here are some of the samples of the product that's available and that they have valued as the top ones, and we see 21.2, 22%, 24.79, and some of the names are very interesting as well. So here's what our youth hear: that marijuana is harmless. Sometimes it's joked about, it's made fun of, it's glorified even on some of the television shows and the movies that are there. And the efforts to legalize and decriminalize are well funded in picking up strength, which also impacts our youth as well. But the question I think that we have is marijuana medicine? And we've talked about, we've heard the resolution. We've talked about what medicine is, and there is evidence that there is some efficacy to parts of this plant, of the many chemicals that are in it. So it is a responsibility for us to look and see what's there. Sometimes doctors' offices are like this. And we've heard that we have medical marijuana and have since probably the mid-'80s with Marinol. And the latest to be added to this is just this year has become available by prescription with the Epidiolex which is treatment for young people in the seizure disorders. So we have some products that are available to us for prescribing now. So we've also heard about the different plants that we use to create medicine. And we would use these as medicine, but we wouldn't use these in the same forms because these have gone through the process. These medications, penicillin has gone through a process to become. I can't, a doctor is not going to tell me to go chew on moldy bread because my questions will be, how long do I need to chew on this moldy bread? Do I need to change this moldy bread? Do I, how much and how often do I do this? So right outside my house was this beautiful willow tree, and I love willow trees. I thought they were beautiful. Never once did I think that I would just go grab some of the bark off of that tree and chew on that bark to be able to get the effects of aspirin. But I can go to a pharmacy and I can get a bottle of aspirin. And if I go to Frankfurt and get a bottle of aspirin, or if I go to Owensboro and get a bottle of aspirin, or if I go to California, wherever I go, it's going to be the same wherever I go. There are precautions. And several years ago, we had the Tylenol scare where there was product that was tainted. So the Tylenol was able to be pulled off of the shelves. So there's benefits by doing that. And that's what we are thinking with FDA approval. So what FDA approval means is that the effectiveness and risks have been scientifically examined and weighed, that interactions with other drugs have been considered. Is there a problem with another medication that we need to be aware of? You know, those big pharmaceutical panels that we get when we get a prescription. What are those things that are on there? Are there pre-existing conditions that it could cause a problem with? How much should we take and how frequently should we repeat this dose? And we've never had a drug that we have ever smoked. So what would be the administration of this to be as a drug? Last month usage, and this was from 2015, and this is against SAMHSA, and they, the states at the top are the states who have medical or recreational legalization. Kentucky is down the line there, and there are some states that have the lighter shade of purple there that are medical that have possibly legalized later. And not had all of the guidelines in place yet. But those at the top are the ones who have the legalization. And I have circled on this slide where Kentucky stands in all of the different age groups. So it shows where we are overall, where we are with the adolescent population, where we are with 18 to 25s and with adults. So it shows where Kentucky falls in line with. And it's been said that we could get rid of the black market if we legalize, but the black market is not going to go away. And sometimes it emboldens the black market to have legalization. Cigarettes has been a legal product for years, but there are still cigarettes who are sold on the black market, and kids still manage to get their hands on cigarettes. Again, a heavy target toward our youth. Looking at revenue versus our expenses, we see that with alcohol, we receive $14 billion as a country in revenue for alcohol, but our societal cost and cost to employment, cost to court cases, costs are excessively more than the money that we take in, and the same is true with tobacco. So when we look at the treating of diseases, we look at the lack of workforce that might be available during the treatment of the diseases. We see that there is a huge disparity between our intake and our outgo. So in looking at marijuana legalization, and we look at the highest in each of these age groups, Rhode Island has the highest use in the nation for 12 to 17-year-olds, and they are a medical marijuana state, 55% higher than the national average, 71% higher than us in Kentucky. 18 to 25-year-olds, Vermont has the highest use in the nation. Again, they are a medical state as well. 88% higher than the national average, 141% higher than Kentucky. And in the 26 years and above, Alaska has the highest use in the nation, and they are a recreational state. And that's 113% higher than the national and 157% higher than Kentucky. That is what I have to say. Thank you all for your time, the opportunity to come and speak to you. It is an important topic, and we look at it from a prevention aspect. I'm drawn to many things that I've heard today, but protect, promote, prevent, those are all things that are important and important for us to look at and what we as prevention specialists look to do. Thank you all.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I think, the charge of this committee will go forward, and the charge of the General Assembly, but we make our decisions by being informed members, House and Senate. That's a responsibility that's entrusted to us, and so I want to thank you for being here today. I don't think there's any questions. I see people were taking notes. And just as a reminder, also included in your packet was what will legalize marijuana cost employers. I think that's important if you want to keep some of the paper that's been handed out to you today, along with the fact sheet that you provided and statistical information. And I'm sure you'll avail yourself to members in the future to maybe come back as these bills and pieces of future legislation move forward. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Dr. Bentley, thank you. Any
you.
last comment or word?
It's been nice to work with you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you. And I really want to say for all of you out there, for the advocacy, for the work that and the organizations that you represent, thank you. Thank you from myself, from my co-chair, and thank you for, the citizens of the Commonwealth for what you do to improve their health, no matter what age they are in their journey. I've always believed that education and health are part of an economic development, or part of that three-legged stool that's going to move this Commonwealth forward and where we need to be. That being said, there was one thank you that we haven't said today, and it comes from both of us. And we get to sit here and we have the agendas in front of us and all the work, but behind the scenes, whether it is a bill being drafted for the members or us to be put forth, what is the organization of this meeting, are often coordinating with all of you as you bring your issues before this committee. And that is the staff of this committee. Of course, I'm a little biased. I think we would say the best staff in the General Assembly of all committees. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you.